13 minutes to 8.
Well, there are big changes ahead for education under the new government. National standards are going, league tables for primary schools will be a thing of the past, and charter schools will come under much more scrutiny. We can speak now with Chris Hipkins. He's the new Minister of Education. He's in the Wellington studio. Good morning.
Good morning.
A big question to start with. What's your philosophy on education?
I want our education system to bring out the best in every individual, whether they be a child or an adult, and that means making sure that education becomes much more personalised and much less one size fits all.
OK, how is that different to what the national-led government was doing?
Well, I think the national-led government, unfortunately, were reinforcing a whole lot of policies that were one size fits all, and national standards is a classic example of that.
Yeah, when's national standards being dropped?
Well, we're working on that at the moment. National standards was a bit of a hoax into some respects because they were neither national nor standard. So we're doing a bit of work to make sure we get the timelines right, to make sure that we're keeping the quality of information to parents about how their kids are doing high. That's probably our number one focus in managing that transition. We'll be through that, I think, in the next few weeks to the point where we can make announcements about what we're going to do.
So realistically, they could be gone at the end of this academic year?
That's certainly quite possible.
What's going to come after?
Well, we're going to make sure that children are still assessed, but teachers will have a lot more professional trust and judgment around how that is done, and parents will get really much better information about how their children are doing, and it'll be based on the whole curriculum, not just in literacy and numeracy.
But what does that actually mean in terms of the information parents get and how they understand where their child's sitting compared to their peers?
Well, there are 8 curriculum levels now, and so rather than using national standards, which basically are almost competing with the 8 curriculum levels, we're going to say to schools that we want them reporting to parents in plain language where children sit in regard to the 8 progress levels in the curriculum, and they've got a range of tools they can use, including PAT tests, which will be familiar to many people because they've been around a long time, and more modern assessment tools that they can use.
Does that mean that teachers are going to have more in the way of reporting to do for children, and that's going to give them extra work?
No, they'll actually have less in the way of reporting to do, but it'll be much higher quality. We're focused on the quality of the assessment and reporting rather than the quantity of it.
Why would the national-led government not have done this if it is less bureaucratic and gives a better snapshot of how a child's doing?
Well, I think the national-led government, to their credit, towards the end of the last term, were saying that they acknowledged that national standards weren't measuring a child's progress and that there were problems with them. Unfortunately, their solution to that was to double down on the problems rather than address them. But I think they did acknowledge that there were some issues with the way national standards were implemented.
You're going to be offering an extra $150 to schools that drop the parental donation. When's that going to come in?
That'll be coming in as soon as we can appropriate the money for that. So I'm getting some further advice on when that's going to be possible. We want to make sure that every child in New Zealand has their right to a free schooling upheld, and at the moment we acknowledge that they're not.
But a lot of donations currently are more than $150, so how are you going to make schooling free in that way?
Well, there are 2 strands of work here. One is around implementing that policy, the other is around the review of Decile funding, which the current government, or the previous government I should say, left us with, and we're picking that up and looking at that, and that is looking at the funding differentials across the different schools, acknowledging that some of those mid-decile schools kind of get clobbered both ways. They don't get the high levels of decile funding, but they also don't get the high levels of parental contribution. So we're going to look at those things all as part of the wider situation around school funding. But our goal is very clear, and that is to ensure that kids get a free education.
Sure, so you essentially are going to carry on that work about potentially scrapping the decile setup and looking at a different model.
Well, I haven't had a chance to look in detail at what the previous government were working on, but I certainly will be doing that as a matter of priority.
But the decile system could go.
The decile system is certainly, there are live questions about that, and I'm not going to preempt them, but I have concerns about the decile system as the previous government did.
What about charter schools? The current charter schools are going to be kept. Is that the case?
No, what we've said is that the charter school model will be disestablished. We won't have charter schools as a model anymore, but the 10 existing charter schools, we'll deal with them on a case-by-case basis. I'm not going to preempt what that might look like. There's a range of options, including integration or becoming schools of special character or becoming private schools, or there's a range of options. And we'll just work with them in good faith, one at a time, to figure out where they'll fit within the system.
Is it likely that they'll all become special character schools?
Again, I don't want to preempt that. Some may choose to close. They may choose to say, okay, it's this way or the highway, and that's going to be their choice. But that's our least preferred option. We've got around 1,000.
So you do want to keep them open in some way?
We have around 1,000 students attending them now, and in managing the transition, their best interests are going to be paramount in my considerations, and so I want to make sure that they have the least disruption possible.
Can teachers expect a pay rise?
I think that's a matter for bargaining, but clearly I acknowledge that teacher salaries have been fairly constrained over the last decade, and that there is a bit of a head of pressure building up there. What I want to be clear with the teachers about is that their expectations have to be reasonable. The current government is going to have a constrained fiscal environment.
Above inflation rise?
We will only have the amount of money available that we said before the election we have available for education, and we'll have to accommodate a number of demands within that, and I acknowledge that teacher salaries will be one of those demands.
Above inflation rise?
I'm not going to preempt what might come out of the bargaining.
Thanks very much for your time. Chris Hipkins there, the new Minister of Education. It's 7 minutes to 8.
And staying with politics, more young people voted in this year's election, but